Cool. Hi, everybody. Welcome. Welcome to the PDC 2008. It's really been like Windows 7 day today, starting off with the keynote and all the sessions and all the stuff that we've seen. And like the sessions on the desktop and integrating there. It only seems fitting that we finish off the day with the Windows 7 Explorer. I'm David Washington. I'm the Platform PM on the Windows Find and Organize team. And our team owns a whole stack of technologies. Everything from the indexer to Windows Search, all the way up to the Windows Explorer. And today we're going to talk about how you, as devs, can leverage that stack of technologies in your app to empower users to find, visualize, and organize their stuff. So let's get into it. What are we going to talk about today? Does this button actually work? Here we go. We're going to start off by looking at the landscape of finding and organizing data. And then we're going to look at what's new in the Explorer, both our overall investments and our two main investments in libraries and federated search. And in the second half, we're going to look at what all this means to you as developers in your apps, because you likely either create user data or consume user data in your apps. So we'll look at what this means. And right off the bat, I'll tell you, if you're using the common file dialog, all this stuff in the Windows 7 Explorer, you're going to just get in your app. You're just going to get it. It's going to work. And so we'll go through that. And then we'll finish up with call to action and questions. And then we'll all head to the party, because I know we all want to get there. All right. So finding and organizing data. So there's been this explosion of digital content over the last few years, and users need a way to sift through all that data and find that one file that they care about. And we look at the problem from two directions. One, like finding that one file, you know something about it, you know what it looks like, you know who wrote it, and you just want to find it. And also organizing. As you get content, where do you put it so you can easily get to it later? So that's how we see the world. So let's look at what we did in Windows 7 with that in mind. And we're going to take a minute to look at this from the user perspective so you know exactly why we did this. But then we'll drill into the code, so don't worry, we'll get there. So Windows 7 Explorer. When we looked at what we wanted to do, we looked at it from a few angles. We knew that we wanted to clean up those everyday things that we know people do, like drag and drop files, navigation around documents, pictures, and music. And we just wanted to make them as clean as possible. And second, we wanted, in Vista, we added a ton of power, but it was kind of buried, and it was hard for the everyday user to take advantage of it. So in Windows 7, we wanted to bring all of that technology to the masses and make it easier. And also, we made two big bets in big features, libraries and federated search. And we wanted to seamlessly integrate those into the experience so people didn't have to learn a whole new UI. So let's look at the anatomy of the Windows 7 Explorer. And I put this up here. We'll get to each of the individual features in the demo, but I put this up here so you could see all the power that we've added in the Explorer. But it's in the same familiar user interface. Like Windows Vista and Windows XP users aren't going to freak out when they see this. We didn't redesign the Windows Explorer, and we didn't have to in order to give the power that we wanted to do. So, and I mentioned libraries and federated search. And we saw this in the demo this morning, too. Libraries are a new way for users to organize their files in a way that wasn't possible to them before. And federated search is a way to connect to your data on remote servers through the Windows Explorer. So let's actually drill into these and look at them in depth. So libraries. So with libraries, we know that users have told us they need a richer way to see their data that's independent of the folder hierarchy. And second, we've done studies that have told us that about half of user data is stored outside of the user profile. So the way that we address this with libraries is we let users aggregate all the locations that they care about in a library. So you can think of these as like super my folders. Like in Windows XP, you had my documents and my pictures. In Windows 7, you have super my documents and super my pictures. And what they do is you can say, oh, I keep my music on my D drive and I keep it on my external hard drive. Put that all in my music library without copying it. It's just that one place to see your stuff. And second, they let you view pivots of your data so you can see it independent of the folder hierarchy. And this will become more clear in the demo. Our second major investment was in federated search. And this came from the enterprise. Data is growing just as rapidly in the enterprise as it is on the desktop, but instead of moving all around the computer, it's moving off the computer and into the cloud and into central data repositories like SharePoint. And it's also getting scattered into these databases like HR databases and legal databases. So enterprises have asked us for a solution that lets them access all this data that integrates with their existing applications and their existing workflows. So federated search does just that. It gives you a consistent experience of that remote data through the Windows Explorer. And it's all about that rich Explorer client experience. And because it's in the Explorer, then it really means all the applications that host the Explorer, all the applications that use the common file dialog. So we'll get to that in the demos. But this is, and we're really excited about this, both as a user feature and as a platform. So, and we'll get to that. So that's really enough talk. Let's actually get to the demo and see the first in-depth look at the Windows 7 Explorer. So here we are, looking at my M3 build here. Everything that I show you today, you can go and play around with on your own, on your builds. So it's all running M3 code. So here we go. Let me just launch Documents. And the first thing that you'll notice here is Documents. It looks just like Documents. It's very familiar. You may think nothing has changed. But the next thing that you notice is this pane here at the top. And this is the library pane. It has a little bit of functionality here, a little button that says Arrange By. And this will let me see my files in different ways. And also another button here that will let me manage the folders that are in this library. Let's start off by looking at Arrange By. It's going to arrange all of my documents by author. So here we are looking at all my documents by the person who wrote them. And I can drill into any one of these tidy little stacks, like Brutus here, and see all the documents that were written by Brutus, and do all the things I'm used to doing with my documents. And the second thing here is these new views, they're great, but they wouldn't be very useful if I couldn't do all those things that I'm used to doing with my documents. So here I've got some sort of messy documents here on my desktop, and I want to clean them up. I can just drag them here into my documents library, just like I'm used to, and I get a tidy little stack for each one of the authors for someone who's done that. Or I can just go back and view them by folder. So this is the documents library. It's sort of like, it works just like my folders did before, but I also get these rich views over content. So let's go on and look at library locations with music. So here I've got a few artists here in my music library. And actually, I keep most of my music on my D drive, on my second partition. So I'm just going to include it here in my library. So I launched the library locations dialog. This is not final UI. And let me just click Add and go to my D drive. You're seeing the cleaned up navigation pane here. It's a lot easier to get to drives than it was in Windows Vista. And let me just grab my, my music, include that in there. And then I've got all my music in the same experience. And it didn't copy it. It didn't do anything weird with it. It's still on the D drive. It's just all in this one folder. And actually what we're looking at here is a metadata-backed view of my music. So I'm seeing all of the artists. And this is independent of the folder hierarchy. Let me just switch back to folder. I see all the folders here. But if I go by artist, I'm seeing this metadata-backed view. I can drill into Radiohead, see all the albums by Radiohead. And I can drill into any one of these and see the actual files. Or I can interact with these, like I can click play all and play it in Windows Media Player. So then we're starting to see like how this is, this can be useful. Like I don't have to copy all my stuff from my D drive. I can just use it in this one experience. And something else that we've added with libraries in Windows 7 is we've basically juiced up the search box. So in Windows Vista, we had a technology called AQS, Advanced Query Syntax. I'm sure some of you are familiar with it. It's a way that you could type a string like tags, : and filter the set by a certain property. It's kind of esoteric, so a lot of people didn't discover it, even though it was super powerful. So in Windows 7, it's here for everyone. Right in the search box, I've got search filter suggestions. So I can just click on any of these. Let me just click on date taken. And I can filter all my pictures by 2007. And so now I'm looking at all my pictures by 2007, filtered right from the search box. So that's a lot of power that it's given me. But the next thing here that's really interesting is that it's actually teaching me how to do this myself. You can see how it's actually typed out date taken in the range. So I could type that back in, or I could type in another query here. Let me just type tags, : and you see I'm getting all the suggestions for things that I want to filter. And this isn't the entire schema. This isn't every property on the system. These are actually the only properties that I have to filter in this view. So it's very adaptive that way. So I can just filter this by sheep and see all the pictures of sheep. It's kind of like IntelliSense for your data, if you think of it like that. So that's the search box, and we've added a lot of power there. But something else that we focused on in Windows 7 is also around search relevance. And knowing why you got a file back after you search for it. So let me just go to my documents library here again. And I'm looking for a file I know has something to do with Viva. So when I search here, in the search results, I see a few things. I see all this yellow. That's hit highlighting, so you see exactly why we returned a certain hit. And not just in the title, it's actually in the description as well. And the description is the actual indexed full text of each of those items. So it's very clear why I got certain results back. And you can see our improved relevance algorithms here. You can see at the top, Viva, matched in the file name is obviously the most relevant item. And then down here, items that are matched in the description aren't as relevant as that item. And that wasn't in Windows Vista. We've actually improved relevance. And third here, in Windows Vista, we had a whole platform and previewing architecture that made it possible to preview files. But it wasn't necessarily very discoverable for our users. So in Windows 7, it's just one click away. You can just click, and then you get previews. And then you can close it. It's just you get a quick look at each of these files. And there's a keyboard shortcut. You can just Alt-P it on and off. So it's really easy. So that's libraries. And that was a major investment. And we're really excited about it. And it's resonated well with the people who've seen it. So we think really people are going to like it. So the second thing I want to show you here is federated search. And so here I work, actually here we're looking at a SharePoint site, WSS Demo, and there's a ton of documents up here. And you can imagine I work with my team and I store documents here. So SharePoint works well because you can browse around and you can upload files and get back to them. But it has limitations. It prevents you from you can't drag and drop, you can't do right click, the things that you're used to doing in the client. So here we have a search connector here in the nav pane for the WSS demo site. And this could have been deployed via group policy, or I could have installed it by clicking on a link on that website. And I can just search, let me just search for Forrester. And what's happening here is it sends my search query to that SharePoint site. The SharePoint site is doing its internal query, and then it returns search results to the Explorer. That's pretty cool. So here I've got these files, and I get the same rich experience of that remote data as I was getting of the local data. Hit highlighting, the snippet here of the contents. I can click and get a preview of any one of these items. I can drag and drop it to the desktop. I can right-click. All those things that I'm used to doing with my files, I can now do with remote stuff. So that's where we made an investment. And I can do this from any application. So, that's federated search. And it's really excited because I'm really excited about it because it's the edge between software and services. Everyone's talking about that. So here I am in an app here, Microsoft Word, and I go to Insert Picture. And I can just go to that same SharePoint site and search for, what do we have here? Search for DNA. Thanks, Brandon. And I can just grab a picture that was on that SharePoint site and insert it into this document, depending on how fast this network connection is. So here, this image was inserted in the document, and then I can do all those rich things that I'm used to doing with local content on something that I got from a remote site. So it's really exciting, and it works great for SharePoint, but what's really exciting is the platform here, and so we might as well just get into this. Here we go. So here we go. So what does this mean for your app? So again, I'm just going to keep pushing this point. If you're using the common file dialog, libraries will just work with your app, and also and you get federated search in your app, and that's great. And the second thing I want to talk about here is there's a platform opportunity for both libraries where you can really light up on Win7 and federated search, where you can light up your web service on Win7. So let's look at libraries under the hood and see what they really are. So libraries are the new entry point to user data in Windows 7. And they're really built on top of the existing system that was there before. The known folders are still there, like the documents folder is still in the same place. But there's a new entry point. It's like the new known folder for each library. And this is what gets launched when you click on the Start menu, and it's promoted in the nav pane there. And each library is a collection of folders. It could be any number of folders. And we do our best to index those locations. And that's how we get those rich views in the Explorer. And something that's interesting about libraries is they're storage backed. So every library has a default save location. So that's what happens when I drag files to a library. They go to the default save. Or when I save files in Notepad, they go to the default save location. And libraries fit into the existing shell programming model. So there's all this new functionality around default save location and aggregated locations and stuff. It's all wrapped up in the iShell folder programming model. So it's abstracted away. And we'll get into that. That will probably only apply to some applications. And the majority of you out there probably are picking one file or saving your files out. And that's why the common file dialog is great for you, because it really just handles all of this for you. If you save to a library, we'll return the path to the default save location. So it just happens seamlessly. Same with open. If you pick a file, it'll just return the path to that file. But there's an interesting platform opportunity here, because if you think about it, the user is telling the system where they put all of their music, where they put all their pictures. So now apps can start to light up and take advantage of that. So if you think of a slideshow app, as just for instance, they can just consume the pictures library locations and not have to have a separate config UI. They can just start off and grab those. And they can use the existing shell abstractions to take advantage of that. And finally, we have a new library API that allows applications to manage library locations. And there's a class of apps out there who are already libraries. These are the iTunes and the Winamps and the Windows Media Players, photo galleries. You can actually manage the libraries, so you can manage the same consistent set of locations that are in Explorer. So And we have a new API for that. So let's take a look at this and look at some applications that are library aware and look at what they mean in Windows 7. So let me just close this out. So the first thing that I want to show for the majority case out there is just open and save. And so I just have Notepad here. We haven't updated the way it opens and saves in Windows 7. So let me just save a file to, weird. That's nothing to do with anything. So let me just save a file to my documents library. Let me just type David, David 1. And when I open up my documents library, you see that it shows up there. But I can view this by library location, and you see that it was actually saved to the personal documents folder or the My Documents folder, the existing folder. So if the user goes in and changes the default save location to be public documents, just change that. And then let me go and resave this. I'll save as David2, save. When I look at the documents, the file was saved to the public documents folder. So the user is in control of where their files go in their library. But for the majority case, users will just go to their documents and they see that their document was saved to the documents library. So it kind of happens automatically. So that was opening and saving files. Let's take a look at another class of app. This might be a backup app, or this might be that photo slideshow app out there. So here we go, Star Backup. And this is an app that lets me pick a folder and then it backs it up. So let me just run it so we can see how it works. I think I've got some. Just run it. Here we go. Run it so we can see how it works. And let me just grab backup. And I can back up a folder on my C drive here, perf logs. And it gets added to this list. So something that's interesting is, what if this app could actually back up the entire documents library, like all the locations that the user said they care about for documents? So today, this app only deals with file system locations. So when I go to Documents and I click OK, I get this dialog that says, oh, I can't return the documents library. The user can still get to their library locations. They can expand this and get to My Documents and add them in. But this app could really light up by being able to back up that entire documents library. So let's take a look at what it would mean to do that. So here we go. In this case, we're using the folder picker. It's a variation of the file dialog. But we could be using sh browser folder. But the key restriction here is we have this force file system flag that we're passing in here. So I'm going to remove this restriction. And what this is doing is it's allowing the dialog to return non-file system locations. And libraries aren't file system locations, but a lot of apps are already used to these non-file system locations. If you think of desktop, it's really an aggregate between the private desktop and the public desktop, and other locations like computer. So libraries are non-file system locations. So let me just go to, so here I've got some code that discovers all the files in a particular folder using the file system. What we're going to do is update it to use some code that discovers all the files using some shell APIs. So I'm just going to just change this to discover using shell. And so here's my fictional code that uses the file system. So what we're going to replace it to use is a shell helper that's really handy called namespace walk. And what it does is namespace walk takes in the shell item, which is the folder that we got back from the folder picker. And we passed in a few options here. We don't want it to walk into shortcuts. And I have it pop a little dialog here so we can see it's actually walking. And we can say how deep we want it to walk. And it also takes a callback, so you can actually handle each item and add it to your list of things to back up, or maybe back it up at that moment. So this is a really handy helper that we can use that will handle all the shell stuff for us, and it can just walk through all the items, and then we can just back them up. So let me just run this again with the update. I think I get this F5. So let me just grab my documents library here. And it pops up this little dialog, and there's namespace walk that was walking through all those items, and we've got it here. And I've gone one step further here and actually enumerated the library locations in the UI. And you could imagine a backup app that would only want to deal with the file system paths and just ignore the shell APIs. So you can do this, and actually you could do this with the new library API to just get the locations in any library. And I know there are a lot of managed developers out there. We have a wrapper, and we've tried it, so it seems it works. So we're trying to get that shipped in the beta SDK for you. So that was making an application library aware, and it's an instance where an app could light up with libraries. Let's look at a final instance with libraries that is really interesting, and that's the Windows Media Player. Then this is for the library managers out there. So here we go. I'm opening Windows Media Player. This is the first time I've ever opened it on this machine. Let me just launch this. And behind the scenes, what this app is doing, what Windows Media Player is doing, is reading all those library locations using the library API, and then it starts to look for them and adds them into the experience. So you can see that it's adding all my music, even the stuff that I added from my D drive, right out of the box. It's like a great out-of-the-box experience that you can have in your app. And something else that's interesting here, and this is really the next step, Windows Media Player is managing the same set of locations as the Windows Explorer is. And your app can do this too. So let me just edit locations, and we're seeing the same manage locations dialog as we saw in the Explorer. So this is really part of the library's platform. And again, this isn't final UI. It'll look better by the time we ship. So let me open up the Explorer music library, and here's my music here. I'll just throw that over there. So when I remove that music folder from my library, you can see it's removed from Explorer too. So the Explorer and Windows Media Player is in sync. But if I add it back in, let me just add that same music folder, my stuff, add. If I add it back in, Windows Media Player gets the notification and adds it all into their experience. So it's like these are in sync. And if you can imagine your app would be listening to the music library as well, you could be in sync too. There's only one concept of library locations. And you can imagine what users have to deal with now. Like, oh, I have iTunes, and I have Windows Media Player, and I have Zune, and they all are managing a different list of locations. So with this, they only have to manage one list because the system provides it. And another thing is, like, if you're a library manager today, you may want the value of being of this aggregate functionality, but you don't want to be in the business of managing libraries. So you can leave that up to the system to do that for you. So that's libraries and the libraries platform. There's a ton of depth there. So if you have any more questions about that, we can just, I'll be in the lounge all week so we can chat about this. But it's really exciting, both as a user feature, as we saw when we walked through it, and as a platform. So let's move on and look at federated search. So we mentioned this. Federated search is about getting that rich client experience of your remote data. And the interesting thing here is that it's all server-side. You don't have to run any client code in order to do this. So you can do it on any server you have, and you don't have to run any code on the desktop to get that to work. So I'm just going to say that again. No client code. I'm sure when you came to a shell talk, you probably were not expecting to hear that. So, and we've designed it to be super lightweight because there are all these disparate data sources that I was talking about. So we're leveraging the OpenSearch 1.1 standard and the RSS standard to make this work. And let me just walk through what the flow is here, how this works. So a user installs an OSDX file, the OpenSearch description, and that could be deployed by group policy, like I said. And then they get that little search box. So they can type in the search box. Windows sends that search request to your web server, and your web server just returns RSS results, and we show them in the UI. And we support some extensions that make it so you can define really rich items in the Explorer. So let's look at that in a little bit more detail. So here we go. This is how it works. In order to be a search provider, you need to accept queries in your URL, something that a lot of web services already do today. You need to be able to return RSS in your search as search results, something that a lot of web services already do today. And then you can really light up in the Explorer by mapping your custom properties to the Explorer properties, and also by specifying thumbnails and previews in a very data-driven way. And so let's take a look at actually building one of these federated search providers. So let me just switch over here. Close out of this. So here we go to my code folder, Adventure Search. So what we're going to be looking at is a web server there's already, you can imagine this is already out in the wild. It has no concept of Win7, and it searches the AdventureWorks database. I'm sure some of you out there have played around with it. It's the public database. And so let's go ahead and run this. Opens up in Internet Explorer. So we've got a search box, a little logo. Let me search for a mountain. And this is like the product inventory. And when I search, I get some search results in the browser. Great. And I can click on any of these and get some more detail. So that's how this works. And then we can just go into, we see that this search provider is actually returning RSS results. And that's the key to making it work with Win7. So let me just view source and see what the RSS looks like. It's just your standard RSS. It's got a title. It's got a link, description. This one has a date. So it's just RSS here. So let me close this out. And let's look at what it would take to hook this up to Windows Explorer. So what we're going to look at here is an open search description file. And this is the magic. This is really what glues it up. So this is, let me just zoom in here. So I have this open search description file. I give it a name, and I just specify the URL. So it's just telling, hey, Windows, this is my URL, and this is the token to replace with search terms. We prefer that you also specify a start page or an index so we can more efficiently return results from your server. But this is how it's glued up. So let's actually run this in the Windows Explorer here. Let me just launch this. We get a little dialog that pops up. This search connector was successfully added to Windows. It says what it's searching. And let me click it. Oh, I clicked that a few too many times. and it gets a little search box. So I can just search for mountain, that same search that I did in the browser, and I get those search results in the Explorer with the same rich hit highlighting and snippets. And I can open up the preview pane, and I get previews for this item. So in the Explorer, we wired this up to some simple web service and that has no concept of Win7. So let's take a look at the code. So here we go. Here we have this search RSS project. This is what's returning the RSS results. So what's working so far is this basic RSS output. And here we're using LINQ to query the AdventureWorks database and also to create the RSS. But really, you could use whatever you're using. You could use Ruby or PHP, whatever works for you. So the next thing that we want to do with this web service is make the results more rich in Explorer. So what we're going to do is we're going to specify a thumbnail. And Windows 7 supports the Media RSS thumbnail standard, so you can wire up each of your items with a thumbnail. So let me just uncomment that. And see, we're just passing in a URL for the thumbnail for that item. So let me just run this again. And I'll switch back to the Explorer and just go to that AdventureWorks. So now in my search results, you see I've got a thumbnail. Just by specifying that little blob of RSS in my RSS, I get a thumbnail. And it's shown in the details pane here. It's shown in the view. So you can imagine there's some really interesting things that you can do with your web service to get it to light up. And this part may already work great with your app. So this is cool, but what if we wanted to go one step further and show some more interesting data in the view, like about each of these items? And that's some of the property mapping support that we have in the Windows Explorer. So let me just close out of this. So the way that you map custom properties to the Windows 7 schema is you just output your custom property in the XML, so in your RSS output. So here we're outputting the color of each of the bike, the copyright when the bike was created, and the company for each bike. So let me just uncomment this. Oops, not decapitalize. Uncomment that. And this will get it to output from the XML. Let's just look at that RSS output. So here's our thumbnail that we outputted before in the RSS output. And here is here are the properties, the custom properties that we outputted. So right now, Windows doesn't know what to do with these because they're very custom. So what we can do is look at this in, what we can do is update our OSDX file to map these properties. So here's a second OSDX file that maps these custom properties. And it's pretty simple. What it does is it maps this color property that I outputted to a property in the system schema. So the Windows schema has about 900 properties that are available that you can map to. So you can map any of your properties to those schemas, or you can extend the schema. It's an extensible schema. So you can run a little bit of client code to actually do that. So we've just done that with all three of our properties. And something else that we've done here is we've updated the view layout. So the provider, without writing any code, can say, hey, these are the properties that I want to show in the view. And the way you do that is by specifying a prop list, which is a list of properties that you want to be displayed. So here we're saying in the content view, which is what we saw, specify the item name and the color and some other properties. And we also specify some properties that we want to be displayed in the details pane. So let me just launch out of this. I don't think I need to rerun. I do need to run this updated OpenSearch description file. Successfully installed. Now let me just search for Turing again. So in the search results, now you see that yellow in 2002 are returned in the view just by outputting those properties. And this is all server-side. I didn't have to run any more code on the client. And I see these properties displayed in the details pane. And I did that by wiring that up too. So, and really the possibilities are endless. The next step here would be to specify an enclosure. So each of these items would have a file, because files are great in Windows. Like, I can insert pictures into Microsoft Word and apps. So, apps want to deal with files. And again, with the common file dialog, we'll automatically download a file for an app that doesn't understand URLs. So your app just gets to take advantage of these remote files automatically. Or if you can handle URLs, you can tell the system that, and you can just work with the stream instead directly. So that was federated search and building a federated search provider. And we're really excited about that because it's really our first foray into this data-driven model for shell extensibility. I'm sure some of you out there have built shell folders and provided content for the shell, and that's not easy. Like, I'm not going to tell you it's not easy. So this is easy, and we're really excited about it. So something that I wanted to mention is, so Windows Explorer is really raising the bar for what users are going to expect in your application for search and browse. So the best way to take advantage of the Windows 7 Explorer in your app is the common file dialog. I keep hitting that point. I can hear myself saying it. Is the common file dialog. So you get federated search, you get the libraries. Users can browse around and use arrangement views. They get search suggestions, all those great things in the common file dialog. So if you're using it today, that's great news. And there's actually a legacy file dialog that I'm sure some of you still see in your apps. I'll do a comparison so you can see if you're using the up-to-date common file dialog. Another thing is that you can leverage the search APIs to build this same rich experience that you saw in the Explorer in your app. And a lot of people are doing this today. Google Desktop Search, for instance, uses the Windows Search APIs. The Photo Gallery and the Windows Media Player uses the Windows Search APIs. So these are ways for you to leverage what's already there and take advantage of that. And there's a whole like shell programming model that is really rich. You can do search over the index and file system items. You can get properties and thumbnails all through the shell programming model. And the thing about consuming content that's in the shell, anytime that you're consuming content in the shell, it doesn't matter. You can use managed code in those cases. Like, it's only the cases where you're actually embedding. Anytime that you're extending the shell or being hosted in the shell process, those are times where we highly recommend against using managed code. So that's the shell APIs and picking files. So let's take a look at the file dialog, since I've been talking about it so much, and compare the legacy file dialog to the common file dialog. So I've just got a little tool here. And when I launch this app is created in .NET, by the way. So I'm launching the file dialog app here, and some of your apps might launch this. And you can see you don't see any libraries in this dialog. There's no search box. There's no search filter suggestions. No federated search. You know, it's hard for users to get at that great stuff from your app. But if you're launching the common file dialog, also available through .NET. I've got all my search connectors. I've got my libraries. I can do those same rich pivots in your dialog, in the common file dialog. I can open files from federated search locations. And here, we've actually extended, this application has extended the locations that are shown in the navigation pane to promote their locations. And in Windows 7, we've done a better job of putting those in the top in their own special group. And this is possible through .NET today, through the WinForms file dialog API. So if you're not using the common file dialog, you can just bring it up right now on your laptops and see which one you're using. You definitely want to pick that up today. So let's switch back and look at the final thing that I wanted to mention today, which was file formats. So all the stuff that I showed you in the Explorer heavily depends on file formats. So all of those library features, arrangement views, and the search filter suggestions, they rely on having complete file formats with the proper handlers. And I'm really talking to the file format owners out there, people who own a doc file. And so you need to have the proper handlers for your file type so you get this complete experience. So you can see arrangement views rely on the thumbnail provider to create those rich thumbnails on each of the stacks. And they also rely on the property handler in order to actually have properties on any given file. The search box relies on your iFilter for hit highlighting and those snippets that I showed you. And the search filter, the search query builder, relies on your property handler. The quick preview, before you may not have implemented a preview handler for your file format because you didn't think that users would really discover the preview. Now users are going to be clicking open that button and trying to preview your file. So you're going to want to have a preview handler so users can get at that. So that's just a walkthrough of all of the handlers for any given file type. And in Windows 7, in the Windows 7 SDK, we've really worked really hard to clean up our guidance there and be crystal clear on what it means to be a file format in the shell. And it's really about user files. Like if you have files that users are interacting with in the documents library and in these common experiences, then we want them to be rich, and we want them to have a great experience. So we've cleaned up our docs, and we're shipping a tool in the Beta SDK that makes it really easy to verify and see if your file format is complete. And we're going to play around with that. And just one more point on this, the MFC team is doing a great job wrapping up these handlers. So it's a lot easier to build them, and they're shipping that in Dev 10. I recommend going to their talk. I think it's on Wednesday. It's the MFC talk. So let's use the file format verifier tool and compare a few file formats and see what level of support they've got. So actually, I'm just going to compare two files in the Explorer right off the bat. So when I click on a document here, you see that I've got this rich thumbnail here in the details pane. I've also got these properties displayed here. I can open up the preview pane. And so this is a complete file format. And then let me look at a fictional file format here, a book format, book-ms. So here, there's no thumbnail. You can see there's no properties down here for me to set, no preview available. If I were to search, I wouldn't be able to search the contents of this file type. So this isn't a complete file format, and this file format hasn't plugged into all the different areas of the Explorer. So let's use the file format verifier tool to compare these two file formats and see what it would take to complete them. So right when you launch this tool, it says, oh, select a category for your file type. This is basically what library would your file type live in. So I'm going to click Document. And you just drag your file to the tool. So let me just drag the file here. And I get a report for each one of my items. I've got, oh, there's no preview handler registered. There's no thumbnail provider registered. There's no property handler. This one doesn't even have a verb handler. Most file formats have a verb, so you can double-click on it. So it's a little fictional. But there's no iFilter. That's for fast searching. And it doesn't support all the properties that we expect to work in the arrangement views. So, and then it's really easy. We generate a report, an XML report that you can parse and see specifics on why each of these things failed. And also, you can click on any of these items and view this on view the MSDN documentation and see what it would take to complete this file format. So let's just do a quick compare of Microsoft Word here. We'll just drag that into the tool. So here we go. We got Microsoft Word. It's got a preview handler registered, and we saw that in Explorer. We've got a thumbnail handler, and we saw that quick thumbnail. It has a property handler. We're able to enumerate all the properties, and it looks like we have a little bit of a perf problem with setting properties. So we're actually contacting them to get that updated. So this tool has been helpful for us too. And then we see it has a verb handler, but it's using a legacy verb handler called DDE, Dynamic Data Exchange. So we want to get them to update it because there are more modern formats that are better for the system as a whole. And also, it's got an iFilter here that allows us to search the contents. And down here, we can see category properties. All of the major properties that those arrangement views rely on and the search filter suggestions rely on are supported by Word. There are a few secondary properties that we show here and there that they're not supporting, but we just sort of call this out here. So that's an easy way for you to grab the Beta SDK and try this out and see if your file format is complete. And you can run this tool on Vista. There's nothing Win7 specific about the tool. And actually, that's a point that I'd want to make. There's nothing Win7 specific about file format handlers. All the file format handler platform stuff that I just talked about is in Vista. So all of the investments that you make for Win7 to light up will also work on Windows Vista. And yeah, and same with the Common File Dialog API. We didn't ship a new Common File Dialog API for Win7. It's the same one that was available in Windows Vista. So you can use that API to do that. So here we go. Call to action. What do you need to walk away with? One, use a Common File Dialog. I said it. You could count the number of times I said it. It's the easiest way to get all of the Windows 7 advancements in your app. Also, if you saw Shaitanya's talk, you get destinations if you use a Common File Dialog as well. Second, if you have a file format, make sure it's rich and you have a rich experience in the Windows Explorer. And you can leverage the tools and documentation that we're shipping to make that easy. Second, if it applies to your app, make your app library aware. So if you're a library manager, or if you want to consume library locations, take advantage of the APIs and light up on Windows 7. I'm sure users would be delighted to not have to set up a bunch of settings when they launch your app. And finally, participate in federated search. Be a federated search provider. You may not even have to change your web server today to take advantage of this. You might just need to host that little OSDX file on your web server, and then it'll just work great. So that's all I had today. Don't forget to fill out your evals, and you can watch the session online. And I'm OK with opening up for Q&A. Thanks. So yeah, we have 2 mics, one over here and one over there. So if people have lots of questions, we'll switch back and forth. I've also got Brandon Paddock here, so he's on the mic. So if we have any dev specific questions, we can pass them over to him. Yeah, sure, go ahead.
Just to clarify one thing that you mentioned, I know you mentioned about consuming stuff from the libraries is good to write managed code, but you talked about if you're going to be a provider, like implementing the iThumbnail provider. Just to clarify, you're saying that's still going to be done, should be done in...
Oh, so if you're consuming stuff in a library, you don't, that's separate from providers. So providers are really for people who are creating a file format.
Right, right.
So consuming you can do in managed code. Providing you can't really do in managed code because they're shell extensions.
Is it still using COM for that?
Yeah, it's still COM. They're still the same.
They're loaded
APIs.
in proc. There are a couple exceptions, actually. The preview handlers can run out of proc and can be managed. There are examples of it up on MSDN.
Okay.
And we also have a new API for the Search Federation where you can actually write a local Search Federation handler, and those run out of proc and can be .NET. They're very, very simple to implement.
Okay. And then the other question I had was something you didn't talk too much about was the actual arrangement views, and can you still kind of write your own? Or?
So right now, the arrangement views is not an extensibility point.
Okay.
So if you have a file format, you can, obviously that will play in the arrangement views. But if you have an app, you can easily create those similar arrangement views in your app by using the shell APIs to take advantage of that.
So for example, like the video and the music and stuff has like these special kind of...
it's a rich custom experience for each of those types. You can host that experience in your app by using something called the Explorer browser control, which is kind of like the Trident web control, but except for it's Explorer. You can just host that right in your app and have a rich experience over it.
And one other thing is you can control the content view mode, which is the new view mode in Explorer. So if you have a file type and you register your file extension in the registry, or you have a format handler, property handler, you can emit the list of properties you'd like us to show. So
that's similar to what we did
with the OpenSearch.
Yeah.
Right, so those would show up on the bottom, but you can't technically...
No, in the view as well.
Oh, in the view as well?
In the content view, you see a multi-line view, and it shows the snippets, the description there. You can specify a different list of properties. So you can say, oh, the path isn't important, or the size isn't important, and show something else instead.
Cool.
Right, thanks.
Cool, thanks. Yeah, let's take a question over here.
Okay. The common file dialog has finally put in my computer back. I love that. But the one thing I do miss is the line joining of items to its parent. For myself, I'm a speed reader. I go through these things very, very quickly, but if there's no parent join, that little arrow doesn't give me a good indication of what the parentage is. That's something that used to be old and I used to have to flip it on in XP because they turned it off in the XP originally. But it was taken totally out of Vista, and it totally makes Vista useless for me. And I have to revert back to XP or create my own Explorer.
Are you talking about in the tree, like a little, like the dotted line?
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. I've actually never heard that piece of feedback. I'll definitely take it back to the team.
It'll be a very simple thing to add, I would hope. That's one question. But I'd more take it as feedback than
cool, yeah,
question.
thanks for the feedback.
And The second one is actually in relation to how you enumerate. I'm going to make another suggestion about adding regular expressions to both do inclusions and exclusions. So you could do pattern matching on folder names or file names using regular expressions instead of just star.star, and just give an option maybe in the Explorer UI to say, hey, just put a regular expression to say, like, oh, let's say you have a .svn folder, and you want to say exclude showing or indexing anything under a .svn folder. You want to be able to create that expression.
So you're saying for your app, you want to filter those things? Or for,
I mean right in the shell.
As a user?
Do you mean when you're querying, or you mentioned for indexing, so you want to be able to do this for...
Actually for display or indexing, for both. There is no exclusion mechanism to say, don't index in this folder these filed extensions, for example.
True.
If you use the tool Beyond Compare, beautiful system for setting up exclusions and inclusions, and I highly recommend you look at it.
Yeah, the indexer has a control panel that lets you exclude certain paths.
Only
But
inclusions.
not for...
There's no exclusions on patterns of folder names and file names.
Yeah, not to that level of granularity. Yeah.
But it's, if you look at Beyond Compare,
There
it's
is
the
at
best
API
system I've
level,
ever
I
seen.
think, but
Yeah. Cool. That's good. That's good feedback.
yeah.
Cool. Thanks a lot. Oh,
Nope. Sit on.
I have a couple of questions.
sure.
The first one is regarding libraries. Is there any way to create custom libraries? So, for example, library of books.
Good question. That's a great question. So the library platform is totally, there's a whole programming model around libraries. So you can create libraries, you can add locations, you can remove locations, you can create an icon. All those things that you saw, you can do for your app as well.
Well,
And you'll also notice in the build you have, if you right-click on the libraries node, you can add a new library, name it, and add locations to it.
oh, I see. Okay. The second question I have is around search. I saw that in my example, for instance, if I wanted to search contacts as a part of the search, is there any way to provide that kind of plugin as a search provider? Or, for instance, Outlook email or some other third?
So if, as a user, you want to search, or
yeah,
as a...
in the Explorer shell. So in your case, it looks like you're targeting only HTTP, but I may have some peripheral devices, let's say, like my phone, which I want to include as a part of search in the Explorer. It's connected to my computer. It shows up in my shell.
Interesting.
Do you want me to?
But
Yeah, sure, go ahead.
So we actually have two extensibility points for search that would address that scenario. One is indexing that content. So if you have contacts in Outlook or some other store and you want to index them, they'll show up in search results. And that actually already works today in Vista. Even on XP with Windows Search, you can index your Outlook contacts and you can search for them in the shell or in applications that use the index. The other point is the search federation that we mentioned. So if you have contacts stored on a server somewhere in your company, then you can use the search federation model to send the query to that server and then return the contacts back to the user.
But the problem there is that you guys allow only HTTP. Is there a
No.
plug-in model?
There
Like,
actually is. I
could
briefly
write it-
mentioned it earlier. David didn't bring it up in his talk, but we do have an API for the Search Federation stuff. It's a very lightweight, very thin API, and it's .NET friendly. I have some examples of it. I should try and bring one up on my laptop for the Track Lounge. You implement one interface with one method on it. You take the same parameters that the OpenSearch queries take. So you take the search terms and a start index and a count for how many items to give back. And the API, you just return XML. You return RSS.
Okay, so the same, it's irrelevant where the RSS comes from. As long as you guys get that RSS, you'll render it.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's, for those of you thinking about custom auth type things, that's really our story there. Like if you have a non-Windows auth type solution, like if you have forms-based auth, you could implement it through that interface.
In my case, it is primarily devices. So if I have music on a device, I want to bring it in as a part of Explorer because it's connected to my machine.
Yeah.
Or if there is my phone that is connected to my machine, I want it to be a part of search. And I think your extensibility model will work there.
Yeah, I think either of those could work. You could index it, or you could use a local search connector via the API I mentioned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, I got 2 questions.
Sure.
For libraries, could you use network locations?
Oh, interesting. So right now we think of libraries as local content. So for a user, that's not really supported.
Well, no, you can do network locations. They in the current plan, they have to be indexed on the server.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
So if you have like a Windows Home server, this is actually what I do at my house. I have a Windows Home server that has Windows Search 4 installed on it, and it indexes that content, and then I add them to my libraries, and they work just like as if it was on my machine.
And
they
that
do all
will
the same arrangement views.
Work on 64-bit too?
Yeah.
Actually, I think there were some demos this morning of the home group stuff. So when you're in a home group, you see all of the other users in your network's libraries. So you can see their documents library. And you can do all these same arrangement views and stuff over their data as you could of your local data. And it uses that remote index to do that.
Excellent. And the second question is, do you have any plans for a metadata provider for formats that doesn't have metadata easily, for example, text files, coding files, TJ, graphic files, a fallback, and maybe some warning if you copy to a
It's
CD
interesting. Like, we love metadata. So it's in terms of future directions, we're always thinking about ways to make all files participate in that. But nothing in Win7 makes that possible for all file formats.
Yeah, it's a complicated issue. If you want to
we'd love to
do
chat
something
about
like,
it.
actually, we can talk afterwards. I'm sure there are other questions.
It's really
but,
interesting.
Yeah.
Hi. I have a desktop search provider today.
Oh.
So would it work?
Yeah.
As it is?
You mean
Oh,
like
great. So you have it indexes your...
Yes.
You have a protocol handler? Is that
Yeah.
Yep, those should work in Win7 just like on Vista.
Because there was no mention of it, so I thought.
Yeah, so I can
so
speak to that. In the start menu, those search results will still be returned.
Okay.
And second, we create a search connector for each search provider. So if you go to the search folder, the searches folder, you'll see a little search connector there for your provider. And like you'll see one for Outlook items and for like email and stuff like that too.
Okay, thanks.
Excellent presentation.
Thank you.
And I echo your excitement. You mentioned something about a party, and I feel kind of out of the loop.
Let's go.
Where's the party, and who's allowed to go?
You should have picked up your stuff.
Pick up your stuff.
Yeah, pick up your stuff.
I have an invite.
There's a party.
You do?
Yeah.
Anyone want to give me a ride?
Yeah.
So I'm actually really excited about this because you guys are implementing something that we want today. So what I'm wondering is, are there any plans to provide this kind of functionality in, for instance, Windows Desktop Search or whatever, to make it available on XP and Vista?
Is there a specific piece of functionality that you...
Libraries in specific. Because one of the statements that you made during this presentation, exactly what I've been telling my company for months, is we want the capability of having the media management. We don't want to build it. Other people have done it better. Why should we build it if we're not going to do anything better?
That's great feedback. Like we'll definitely take that back to the team.
at this point, there are no plans for any.
Yeah, because like we want it like tomorrow.
Yeah.
And we've got an app to build it on it right now, and we're looking at having to build it ourselves, and we really don't want to have to do that. But
Yeah, that's always an interesting discussion for any new feature we add to Windows. Like, everyone wants to have it everywhere, but yeah.
I'm really excited about that piece particularly. It's kind of like my baby, the library platform.
Yeah, I'm very excited to hear about it. And
There's
I'm
a
really
common
looking forward to
store
building
for
on it.
user stuff. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry, actually another question came up. There's this feature that was called Open Containing Folder, and when you do a search provider, how does that concept come into
Great.
play?
Actually, I missed that in the demo. I should have done it. I just totally missed it. So we kind of built a bridge between the local experience and the remote provider. You can actually map that that you can provide a URL that says, oh, yeah, this is the container URL. So when you click that, it opens up in the browser.
In the case of in the RSS output, the simplest way to do it is if you have a link and an enclosure for you have like a file on a server, the enclosure is what we'll actually use for the item. So if you have a picture on SharePoint, for example, and you point at the JPEG in the enclosure, when you double-click it, we'll open that in Paint or whatever. But if you right-click and you do Open Container, we'll open the web page that had that item on it.
Right, because the way I can envision this is you might have a container that's not really a folder, but something more, rich.
Yeah,
container.
we have some fallbacks where if you just have a link and you didn't tell us what the container was, we'll just chop off the URL a little bit.
Right.
Which usually works, but
something else there is there's also a button. I don't know if you saw it there in the commands there that said search this website, like show in the browser or something like that. And you can click that and it shows the same search results in the browser, in the internet browser.
Yeah, open search descriptions can also have an HTML. It's actually more common. They have an HTML URL template, and so you make use of that to push the query off to the browser if the user wants to.
Okay, thanks.
Absolutely fantastic session. Thank you for that. And it was very surprising, actually. I didn't think that you will use RSS and OpenSearch and stuff
It's
like
awesome,
that.
right?
It's really, it's just fantastic.
All the stuff that you guys are playing around with on all these other sessions, you're like, oh yeah, now it works in the shell too.
Yeah. No, it's great. My question is actually more of a user perspective question, not technical in nature. Well, in our company, we use both Mac and Windows, and while I'm really not a Mac guy, I really love Quick Look. And, Quick Look is nothing. It's just that they use the preview thing in a special mode. So my question is, do you guys think about something like that where you can
interesting you mentioned that.
Full screen?
You can build that. Like, you can use our preview handler APIs to just say, oh, show the preview for this item. So you could build your own Quick Look on top of the existing platform.
You mean as a third-party application that you run in Windows?
You could show the preview for each item.
Was this discussion anywhere in Microsoft that said, all right, let's look at that and maybe make
it? We focused on that scenario where the user wants to look at the document, and the preview pane is kind of our current take on handling that.
From a screen perspective, screen size, screen space, it's not very clever to have it in the right side as a extra pane thing. And also, for example, if you have a PDF or something like that, are you able to, switch through the pages and basically interact with it completely?
Yeah, previews are very rich. You can switch to the pages. Same with PowerPoint. You can click through them.
All right.
There's even a media preview handler that allows you to play the content.
Okay. So, is this still a discussion point, or is
that's
just saying,
an interesting piece of feedback.
We'll take that back to the team. Yeah.
All right. Thanks.
Yeah. Thanks. Cool. I think that's everything. We'll be in the lounge. So I think it's the end of the day today, but we'll be in the lounge tomorrow and the day after. So come find us if you have more questions.